All right, hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo podcast, part of the Blue Warrior Network. I'm your host, Patrick Moran. Thank you very much, as always, for locking in the final episode, by the way, of 2022 Casual Friday, although there's been not a lot of casual stuff going on here in Buffalo. But anyway, as always, on Fridays, I'm joined by my good buddy, Aaron Quinn from Cover One. Jesus, man, where do we even begin?
What's going on, man?
Christmas just a week ago, not even a week ago, and normally we'd be talking about that and whatever dad gifts we got and shit like that. But
Yeah.
I mean, we all know the big story this week here in Buffalo, and I haven't had an opportunity. I know you've had a lot going on. Really haven't had a chance to talk to you much this week. I did hear you. We were talking about this on here for a couple minutes before we got rolling here. Did your show with Greg Thompson last night at Cover One, and so I know a little bit, but for people listening and watching who might not have caught that, how did this blizzard affect you guys back in the Quinn home in Tonawanda?
Well, so now in hindsight and seeing the stuff that's going on for other people, the blizzard didn't impact us all that much, even though in the moment it felt scary and really, like we were talking offline, just really nothing I'd ever seen before. I've lived in Buffalo now a decade.
Yeah.
I've lived in the Northeast my whole life. I've experienced a lot of weather situations. And this one was just different. It's hard to explain because I'm looking out a window right now and it looks like a beautiful spring day. Yeah, there's snow on the ground, but I can see spots of grass, like it's melting away. And that's kind of the weird thing about winter storms is when you're in them, it's super intense and you're not really sure how it's going to go. And then afterwards, it can be nice and sunny. But I know not all people had the same experience I had. They had power outages for a long time. Obviously, a lot of people died in this weather event. And so all things considered, we had it pretty easy. We lost power for 6 hours, but the heat in my house never dipped below 62. You know, we kept our heat pretty well and we were all bundled up and ready to go. And we did a good job prepping for stuff. And hats off to the town of Tonawanda, man. We pay a lot of money in taxes here. My mortgage is mostly taxes, but they did a fantastic job as best they could in the situation. The plows were running up until you really couldn't drive anything else safely anymore. And then they were out as soon as they could be getting those roads. It was a pain in the ass because they piled up the driveways pretty good, but to get those roads cleared so that the fire trucks, the ambulances and things like that could get going. My hat's off to them because it's not the case everywhere. My wife works downtown. Buffalo just opened up for traffic today. And even in that, they have roads closed and are swooping ice and snow out to get it to central terminals and stuff like that because there's still roads that just aren't even plowed down there. So I feel for all the people that got stuck in this thing, man. It was nasty, Pat. How did you guys do down where you were? We didn't get to
West
talk
Seneca.
a ton. Yeah.
Ditto. What I'm going to reiterate most of what you said, and with Tonawanda, West Seneca did a really fantastic job of keeping roads plowed up pretty much through the entire process, except for when.
And that's probably a little harder down there because I feel like you guys have more. It gets a little more rural where you're at. Where Tonawanda's like, you can just run the plow up and down these roads in Tonawanda pretty easy.
It was pretty good here, all things considered. And by the way, I know what you're saying. People had it a lot worse than us, so we're not going to sit here and bitch and moan about inconveniences that happen to us. But losing your power for 6 hours is not nothing. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's not nothing.
With kids, it's different, right? If it was just me and my wife or me and a roommate, I've done that before. In Maine, I've been without a power in the winter for 8 days or something like that. And living with a roommate and you're running propane heaters inside with the windows open, like I can live real. I've lived in poverty situations before. I can live in bad situations. But when you have kids, there's a different level of responsibility and my neighbors, people that you care for, you're trying to provide situations where that you feel secure and safe. So it's stressful for sure. And it made for a weird Christmas Eve, which was a mild inconvenience again, in terms of what other people had to go through.
Yeah. And look, there's things that should have been done different. And there's no question about that. And you're right. People, again, had it way worse. I did not lose power for 6 hours. But I'm going to tell you this, and I don't have to. I'm calling myself out. You know, but I just don't feel comfortable being a hypocrite when I criticize people and things for doing something that I did.
Yeah.
So, and I'll give you the condensed version because I don't want to spend an hour and a half, our entire time talking about a storm and stupid things that I did. But anyway, so I wake up Friday morning. It was little before 9 a.m. Instantly, my power goes out. And I talked to a buddy of mine who lives the next street over. It got me nervous. He got me, he used scare tactics. I don't think he did it on purpose, but he's like, hunker down, buddy.
Yeah, it could be a while.
You're going to be, it's going to be like this for a couple of days. And I'm like, you know what? Fuck this. Okay. So it's 9:15. The power's out. The storm's starting, like the snow's blowing, but it obviously hasn't really picked up yet. And it's nothing too
not
crazy.
To its full capacity. Yeah.
You're right. And now I should add another part of the story because this is important. My wife didn't sleep home on Thursday night. She was at her mother's house. Now, my mother-in-law has two places where she lives. One's in Orchard Park, one's in Lackawanna.
Okay.
My wife still helps take care of a house. She's kind of in a transition, my mother-in-law, with moving stuff. So my wife was in Lackawanna. And I'm like, man, I ain't getting stuck for Christmas and Christmas Eve. And this is a mentality a lot of people had. And I think this is the biggest reason why so many cars got stranded and led to such carnage that it did. I made a decision. I got Shane up and we went to, with the power out at about before 10 o'clock, before 10 a.m. I packed food, blankets in case we got stuck in the car, all kinds of stuff like that. And we took a ride to Lackawanna, which from my house is like less, maybe not even 10 minutes. I get out, I drive down the street. It's pretty shitty out.
Yeah.
It's getting whiteout conditions already, but it's not like the wind isn't horrible yet.
And it had accumulated, like,
right.
I want to say it started here in Tonawanda around like 9:30 a.m. Friday, but it was bad conditions visibility wise, but yeah, you could still drive.
Sure. Now the snow was bad, the wind was bad, but to your point, there weren't drifts yet. There wasn't snow being pushed, a foot of snow or whatever. So anyway, long story short, we make it there. Then I find out not long after we get there that our power's already back on. What happened was somebody crashed into a tree or something like that and then knocked out power for a couple streets. This is where I got dumb. And this is around noon. We made a decision to get back to this house. So we did it again. Going back, it was significantly worse. Like the whiteouts were worse. And now you're talking snow drifts were starting to build up. There were a couple times where we almost got stuck. Obviously, thank God.
What do you drive? Something.
It was actually we used my son's car. He's got a Nissan Sentra. It's a small car, but it's good in this. It's pretty good in the snow.
Sure.
But we made it. I mean, that's the big thing. But it got sketchy, and I got nervous, and we almost did get stuck twice. If we would have waited another hour, I guarantee you, we would not have made it back home.
So that's a terrifying prospect, man.
So we got home, never lost power again. Throughout the rest of the storm.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad in a way we did, but in a way I'm not. Shouldn't have done it. Got lucky, especially when you hear all these stories of people that got stranded for hours and hours and hours. And I know a couple of people who did, and this led to some deaths. It's just it was really stupid on my part. My rationale wasn't I'm not spending Christmas with my wife, and I know a lot of people thought that. It's like, hey, I know there's a blizzard going on, but Christmas at grandma's a tradition, or my wife was stuck at work and whatever it may be. So, yeah, like I said, it was a stupid mistake on my end. It's tough,
man, though, because also Lackawanna got crushed in the storm too. So that probably wasn't a great place to stay because you might have gotten stuck longer in that situation. I hope that somebody was able to help your mother-in-law get in and out of her house and get her.
She was in Orchard Park and she never left. She was they were perfectly fine. She was never in Lackawanna. She was in Orchard Park.
Yeah.
The whole time.
It's tough for me again. Like I try to have as much perspective as I can if I'm going to talk about stuff because I understand that my experiences aren't the same as other people's. And because I'm a stay-at-home dad, we were able to, follow the news and be prepared for this. I went out and got our shopping done, on Wednesday.
Me too.
Got everything done. And we were pretty much in shutdown mode as of like Thursday night, not knowing we're supposed to be like real bad rain Thursday night, like 40 degrees, 5 inches of rain overnight, and then a flash freeze that night was supposed to happen. That didn't really occur. We got like a little bit of rain, looked like it wasn't going to be that bad. I dealt with some plumbing issues during this, Pat. If people are familiar with the Western New York area, roots grow into the pipes and the pipes crack all the time. I've spent thousands of dollars fixing it. We had an emergency plumbing issue again. So I'm freaking out that night, like I don't want to go anywhere. I know that roads are going to be shutting down. Eventually I do get it fixed. But I think our situation allowed us to be prepared, allowed us to get home. My wife's office was preemptive and like emailing ahead of time of the storm saying like, hey, we're going to shut down. We're going to close this out. Like, don't come into work or leave early on Thursday. We need to get everybody home. I don't think that everybody's jobs, everybody's lifestyles was conducive to that. Their bosses weren't as understanding. They didn't have a spouse at home to take care of some of those things. So I think people were making some decisions based on, hey, they have to work that shift up until the storm's already bad. And if they don't, their boss, they feel pressure that they're going to get fired or whatever it is. And they in the lifestyle where they can't afford that situation. So I think there's a lot of pressure for people to be out traveling, whether it was like you, that feeling of Christmas and family and wanting to be alone, or it was like, hey, I got to be at work till this time. Like my boss just isn't going to let me leave and I have to be out on the roads. And there's really no good answer for that in this type of situation, because I'll tell you, man, like I was saying Friday, what was it, Friday night, Saturday night, I was trying to keep vents cleared for some of my elderly neighbors, trying to keep their doorways cleared. Like I had seen there's a ton of On to Fire Twitter account that does all the EMS and fire reporting for the area. So if I hear sirens, I check that. They're usually right up to the minute, checking the scanners. All they were saying is like, this EMS is stuck, this ambulance is stuck, this fire truck. And so I knew nobody was getting out of their house if they had an emergency, but I wanted to be able to open your door. Like once ambulances are going, can we get a stretcher up to these people's doors? Like that was the only thought in my mind, because I was seeing just all this kind of potential carnage happening with like first responders not being able to get in and out of places. And I'll tell you, dude, walking across the street in full snow gear with that wind blowing, piles of drifts of snow, like it's hard. It was exhausting. I was just like, I'd come back into the house after an hour being out there with my cheeks almost frostbitten, dude. Like I've never seen conditions like that. It's like what you see in, Antarctic explorers out during a blizzard. It was unbelievable. And so I couldn't imagine a parent or something like that trying to get home and their car gets stuck and they try to go for a walk. Like it's so exhausting. I can understand how it just ends very badly to where people are dying out there in these snowstorms, because it's if you're not prepared for it, man, there's no way people should be out in it. And some people were forced to be.
It was the perfect storm, literally and figuratively. The only thing,
it was like 40 hours that thing just stuck over
absolutely.
our houses.
And I'll tell you, man, meteorologists have been, and maybe it's technology in today's world, as opposed to even a handful of years ago, it just seems to be a lot more, they're a lot more spot on with their predictions. The one thing though that was off, I will say this, because with my other job at work, the plan was originally we were going to work until at least 12 and until it started snowing, then everybody was going to get out
on Thursday.
And that's also another reason why my wife ended up, she slept in Lackawanna, wasn't worried about it, because it wasn't supposed to start getting that bad until noon. Like you, I paid really close attention. I went Wednesday night. My house was stocked with snacks and food and all kinds of stuff too. So I was prepared for it, but it did start a couple hours earlier. That was the only difference. But you said this is the worst storm you've ever been. This is the worst storm I've ever been through. And I've, dude, I'm 51 years old, man. And I've lived in Buffalo for 46 years of my life. I was a little kid, so I was too young to remember, but I was alive for the blizzard of 77. All these other snowstorms, it's not even close.
I mean, I got a neighbor that's in his 80s, and I shoveled him out, and the first thing he said was like, this is the worst thing I've seen in my life. And when these guys, like, he's no joker. He's not a recency bias guy. When they're talking like that, like, it's legitimate.
At some point on Friday, it was like mid-afternoon. I bundled up. I went outside just to kind of get a feel. Went in my driveway, not even to the corner of my driveway, but I went in my driveway. It felt like if you were driving in a car and you stuck your head out your window going 65 miles an hour when it's only 30 degrees outside, the wind hitting your face. That's exactly what it felt like. So
it was bad, man. There were some scary moments. The worst night where like standard winds were like around 40 miles an hour, and the gusts were up to there was some registered at the airport of like 79-mile-an-hour winds. And where I live, it's a fairly condensed population here, right? First ring suburb. There's these old trees out in front of and behind everybody's houses. And I was, again, trying to be out there and maintain all this stuff during the storm, trying to stay ahead of it. And dude, some of these limbs, like you could hear them just cracking, and just
yeah,
the way the wind was pounding on everything. My shovel blew out of my hands a couple of times. Like I probably shouldn't even have been out there shoveling in it. Like that was probably a dumb, dangerous thing to do. But yeah, crazy, man. Never have seen anything. It wasn't, I've seen snow come down sideways, and I've seen large snowfalls. I've experienced multiple
sure.
feet of snow. It was, I think, how long and sustained those conditions went on for. It was really like a 40-hour straight. Every time you thought it was going to go away or shrink or go down, it just hung out there.
Yeah.
And that's what I've never experienced, such long sustained punishment from weather before.
It's been a very ugly week. It was an ugly week, obviously, because of the snow and physically. And by the way, again, I talked about this on the podcast earlier this week. Little personally frustrated because I felt like Christmas was ruined in a way because of this storm, which it was for everybody. But at the end of the day, dude, I sat there with my family on Christmas morning. The Christmas tree's on, the lights are on, the heat's on,
Yeah, we
gifts
were
are
lucky.
around the tree, opening it up. I am damn blessed compared to a lot of other people. I know a girl, a good friend of mine, she went to pick up her son from her baby daddy's house. She lives in South Buffalo. Baby daddy lives like somewhere around the First Ward area.
Mhm.
Went there on Friday. No power in that house, got stuck, no power, just got home. We're taping this Thursday morning. She just got home mid-Wednesday. 5 days, kid still hasn't gotten his Christmas gifts, and well, he has now when we're taping this, but 5 days at a house that you did not want to be at, that did not have power. She kept having to go out to her car to charge her phone, and use up a little gas here and there. Luckily, she had a full tank of gas, but again, people had it so much harder. And
Yeah.
and there's people who had a lot worse than she did too. So trust me, I get it. But anyway, an ugly week, not just because of the physical damage and the carnage, but just like with anything else, as the days go by, Aaron, you go on Twitter, you go on Facebook, and everybody is an armchair quarterback
Mhm.
and how things should be done, and criticizing this and criticizing that. The one thing I will say though, and this was a mistake, and you could kind of hear Mark pulling cars on Twitter on Wednesday, more or less admitting that he effed up without saying it, that he effed up. But yes, having more snowplow removers ready, having potentially the storm's coming. We knew for a week it was coming. Having more stuff like that in place would have helped. But at the end of the day, the only thing that was going to prevent things from getting catastrophic was the driving ban. And that's where things got bad because, you just talked about it. People going to work on Friday morning, that driving ban, and I double checked. I didn't want to make sure I was putting out inaccurate information. The driving ban went into effect shortly after 9 a.m. on Friday morning, knowing this storm was coming. 9 a.m. Friday morning is early for a lot of lazy people like me, but
Right.
for a lot of Western New Yorkers, 9 a.m. is kind of late. People get up at 5, 6 in the morning and they go to work.
Mhm.
And had this driving ban went into place, and they said
The
Thursday
night
or
before.
Wednesday or even
Yeah.
Thursday, hey, at 12:01 a.m. Friday morning, there is a driving ban. This storm's coming. It's going to be bad. We kept hearing about it's going to be a generational storm, right?
Yeah.
I heard that word several times throughout the week leading up to this storm. Why was there not a driving ban in place
I think the
going into
response.
Friday morning? I think that's the biggest reason what led to a lot of what happened.
Yeah. Another area of perspective that, again, I don't have, I used to have a little bit more. My dad worked third shift.
Mhm.
And those third shift workers, there's a lot of people out there that are working while the majority of people are sleeping and still stuff. And at least I'm not trying to defend Mark Poloncarz here at all. I don't actually particularly have an opinion on him or don't care.
Same.
But I do think,
I'm not to cut you off. I'm sorry. I'm
yeah,
not a
yeah.
Mark Poloncarz hater by any means.
No,
Go
no,
ahead. Go
no.
ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I just think that there was probably lots of information coming in at that time of trying to get people home, knowing that employers weren't going to do it until travel ban. But I do think in hindsight, from what I've seen, he admitted that there probably should have been instituted sooner. At least the way I was following it, I would like to think that if I was in charge of that, being the wort that I am, I would have done something of the night before, because we didn't end up getting it. But again, that flash freeze event that they were predicting would have been very devastating. I think much more devastating to this storm. And that was supposed to be early on, right? And that would have been difficult travel, where you have 40 degrees and, raining an inch an hour overnight. That's tough in this Buffalo area with our sewers. Like, if we get a 5-inch rain day here, yards are flooded. Basements are backed up. Things like that are happening. So you would have all that stuff, and then you'd have a flash freeze event on top of it overnight, where the temperature was supposed to drop 30, 40 degrees in like 2 hours. That's a devastating event. That's where tree limbs just freeze and break off. And then that wind comes in and you're in big trouble. And so we didn't get that, but that was what was expected. And so overnight, they probably should have cut traffic, having expected some weird weather anomaly event that you knew was going to be dangerous no matter how it played out. And the worst case scenario is the weather doesn't work out that way, but you don't have a bunch of people bailing their cars and dying on your roads because you didn't have it in effect.
Look, once the storm came and it got bad, drivers, snow plow drivers, snow removals, they all got pulled. They had to, because it was like life threatening. It was dangerous out. So nobody could plow a road for a long stretch of time. And I completely understand that. And you're right about third shift workers. But again, by Wednesday, the storm is going to be generational. You put it out there that come Friday night or Thursday night at 12:01, no driving. That means people are going to work.
Shut down your businesses.
Exactly. And people who are supposed to work third shift Thursday overnight into Friday, they don't go to work that night. It's as simple as that. Because
National Guard stuff, though, people are talking about like getting the National Guard here, and they should have been, but that needs to come from like the governor, right? Governor's got to institute getting the National Guard there ahead of time. I know they called the state emergency before the storm started to like initiate some of the use of funds that you get from a state of emergency, but they didn't enact mobilizing troops here, mobilizing additional support here. Outside of, they did get power people here. To your point, though, of pulling the trucks off the road, when we lost power, we were monitoring if there was anybody assigned to our power outage, what the reporting on the outage was, what other outages we're looking at, and it looked terrible when we got on there. People that were out similar to you as like 10:30 a.m. and we're like 7 o'clock at night looking at this. They still haven't had an assignment. Like, nobody was even working on those jobs, and we're like, damn it, we're gonna be screwed. And all of a sudden, I saw a tweet that said they were pulling National Grid guys off the lines because it was just too dangerous of a situation. This is like 9 o'clock at night. They're like, we're calling it. We're going to try to get them back out there first thing in the morning, but this has become too dangerous. And then I just was like, oh, son of a bitch. And literally like 20 minutes after that tweet came out, my power kicked on. So they must have been just like grinding on our pole or something.
These guys
last minute.
They're the heroes of this storm.
It really is.
No question about it. But at the end of the day, you could have a million people with plows, but if you can't get down a street because cars are getting stranded, there's nothing they could do. And that's the single biggest problem. What led to all this carnage was people. And again, this is why I wanted to preface me being an idiot so that I'm not being too hypocritical. Now, granted, it was very early Friday when I drove, but still, I did do it. People took chances because of maybe work, because of
holidays,
Christmas, family, or just because they're idiots. There's a combination of all that stuff.
Sure.
So, the cars are stuck all over the place, especially in the city. I mean, I heard somebody told me who's been doing plowing for all week long. He said it literally like around the Clinton, Kaisertown area, it literally looks like an apocalypse with just cars. There's just cars all over the place, stranded and abandoned.
I think there's a lot, to your point, kind of getting into this conversation, there was a lot of pointing fingers, who's to blame. And I think that was also annoyingly happening on a political level. I don't want to get political here, but like seeing them pointing fingers as to who's to blame. But
sure,
at the end of the day, like, there's a lot of problems in Erie County, but there's a lot of problems with how the city's run. And I wouldn't have had faith in the city's ability to maintain this storm no matter what. And that's where like bigger leaders, either at the state level or wherever, should have known that too. Like if I'm a common dude that's lived just outside the city for all these years and know that they don't use their tax dollars well and know that they don't maintain their stuff well and know that they would be ill prepared for something like this, that's where I would have gotten the support as much as possible, because I know the town of Tonawanda will dig out. I know West Seneca will dig out.
Mhm.
It speaks to the bigger problem that we've seen pop up a number of times here in Buffalo, of the segregation that we see, where the whole area is high tax area. All of Erie County is a high tax area. A lot of revenue comes through this area, but one particular area seems to be limited in resources, limited in what the
Always.
people do with resources. There's corruption that runs super deep throughout it. And so that is just a systemic problem right now in Buffalo that until that gets fixed, when you have situations like this, a natural disaster or whatever it is, those areas are going to be so much more impacted. And we have to find ways to make sure that South Buffalo, places on the east side, aren't just buried in snow for a week because they happen to live in an area that just doesn't handle their municipality resources well at all.
Completely agree. And one last thing too, and look, you just said it. I'll reemphasize it too. Say no political podcast. Aaron and I don't talk politics and stuff
No,
much.
no.
But but I'm gonna say this.
But everyone's looking
I
to point fingers like everyone's to blame here.
Yes, I 100% agree. Look, I grew up on the West Side, so this is. And the one thing I'll say in defense of Byron Brown, the only thing I'm going to say in defense of him is this ain't something new, man. I grew up in Buffalo 40 years ago, okay,
Right.
and it was always terrible with snow removal. Like since I've been alive, Buffalo is always the worst at getting snow off the streets. At
It's
plows
hard.
coming
Cities are
down your
tough,
street.
man. Where are you going to put it?
It's always yes, and that is part of it too. Again, sometimes it's easy to be an armchair quarterback when you don't
Yeah.
realize things. I drive down South Buffalo streets like crazy all week long, and I'm telling you this.
They're tight.
They're tight streets, and here's another thing, Aaron.
You always get a jerk parking on the street that's not supposed to be.
Where you live in Tonawanda, where I live in West
Yeah.
Seneca, most, not all, but a lot of homes are single-family homes that have driveways
Yeah.
and in some cases a garage. In South Buffalo, on the west side, the east side, Kaisertown, Lovejoy, there's a lot of upper and lower apartments. And a lot of
Yes.
people have roommates, and you only got one driveway. So tons of people park on the street. These are
Yeah.
narrow streets, and now you got one side already taken, with cars. And I'm not even talking about this blizzard of 2022. I'm just talking about general when it snows annoyingly a lot.
Yeah.
So plows have a hard time getting down there, or they only plow half the street because, it's Monday through Wednesday and the cars are parked on this side of the street. It's just been terrible. But again, to me, leadership, don't you feel like leadership, to me, one quality of being a good leader is getting people to do what you want them to do or what you think is right. That's what being a good leader is. And that's my biggest thing with Byron Brown. 99% of the criticism going his way is deserved. If they would have did a better job, and this is the bottom line, polling cars, Byron Brown, the governor, everybody, they didn't do a good enough job of convincing people and conveying to people that you need to not be driving. Because for whatever, now again, Christmas.
And to try to get cars off the roads, like we need to find ways. Maybe that's something they do in the future, where the local government or state government subsidizes parking spaces for people in some of the garages that are going to be empty anyway. If you can get your car here in Buffalo to a local garage, like we'll get transport back and forth to get these cars off the road. Like we've been through these storms, like to your point, man, not even generational ones. There's issues in Buffalo whenever the snow happens. There was a big safety issue recently that got shown, which has probably always been an issue downtown, but just got shown because Twitter gives you access and Instagram, where people were recording middle school kids that live down in the city and are walking back and forth to school, trying to walk around these snowbanks and in areas where you can't see, man. That's a huge safety issue for a number of people that don't have transit, that are trying to walk to bus stops, and the bus stops buried under snow and people are kind of standing out in the street. Like those are not also safety issues. So there's got to be some ways to mitigate some of the stuff early. Obviously, these situations, these once in generational situations where you can't get out to plow, are different, but it shouldn't be 3-4 days later, right? They should still be at the type of capacity and the type of planning and preparation where, similar to these suburban towns, are able to that next day start to get people and services out to people that need it. You're seeing organizers, private organizers today. I saw on Twitter, people getting plows and equipment out there because they are getting the roads clear, but they're still buried. People are still buried in their driveways without this equipment, right? And so they're trying to get people in there to help get people out. So planning and preparation could probably mitigate some of this. I don't think you can ever get rid of all the problems that come with these natural disasters, but you could probably have mitigated a number of things with the right type of preparation. So hopefully they learn from this, man.
There were going to be deaths no matter what. There was going to be major issues no matter what. But again, the cars being stuck all over the city, well, all over Western New York, but specifically the city, that prevented first responders from getting to people. That caused deaths. People got stranded in their cars who should not have been driving, or they felt like they had to because they had to work or get to wherever, and they ended up perishing in their cars. It's just terrible. Anyway, it's funny. We could probably have a 3-hour podcast where we don't talk about anything else.
I mean, it's a once in a lifetime event for sure. Now I got that boomer story for myself where it's like, I lived through a once in a lifetime generation.
I blame, who really is to blame for all this is it's not the mayor. It's not the executive. It's not the governor. It's not the citizens of Western New York. You know what it is? It's a 20-year-old kid in Bradenton, Florida. He's the one who's to blame for all this shit.
What do you do?
I'll tell you why real quick. So we moved back to Buffalo after living in Florida for 5 years. We did that last year. My son still has a couple really close friends from high school, 2 or 3 that he still talks to all the time. And he has his one buddy was supposed to come up the weekend of November 18th through 20th. Now, the kids aren't 21 yet, so they can't drink, like they can't go to a Buffalo bar. So they were planning on having a weekend in Canada in Toronto, where they could go out and get their fun on. Yeah. So the weekend of November 18th through 20th, he books a flight on that Thursday night, and that ended up being the snowstorm that we got 6 weeks ago. That rivaled Snowvember of 2014, if you remember that. So his flight got canceled.
Was that really 6 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Dude, this was the 3rd significant snowstorm that we've gotten of 2022 in like the last 6 weeks.
And actually, winter only started like last week. We haven't even, we just officially started.
Scary to think of that. Oh, guess what? We only got 2.5 more months of this shit left. But anyway, so that happened November 18th through 20th. So the kid had got his flight canceled. And then they said, hey, you know what? I'm going to, I'll come up for New Year's. Spend a couple of days before the New Year's and a couple of days after. So he's going to spend a week up at the end of the year. Well, guess what happened this past week? His flight got canceled yesterday. He was supposed to be in yesterday on Wednesday, and his flight got canceled. So this kid twice has tried to book a flight to Buffalo to come hang out with Shane, and both times he's tried to book his flight have been these 2 crazy storms that we've had. Exact same weekends and everything. Because these storms have been all coming on the weekend, by the way, all of them. So it's his fault, not anyone.
I'll take it, man. I'll blame him. We'll pile on him. Start a hashtag.
Before we take a quick break and talk Bills, one last thing. This is the last episode of the year. And again, how can you not be? This is what's depressing, Aaron. And this is why I think a lot of people are in shitty moods. Christmas is supposed to be fun. It's a good time of year.
Right.
And we just spent a half hour talking about the doom and gloom of a generational, once in a lifetime kind of snowstorm here. But anyway, last episode of the year, I'm not going to ask you this specifically, especially without telling you ahead of time, but
sure.
Are you a New Year's resolution kind of guy? Like, I'm not going to ask you if you have resolutions, but are you a New Year's resolution kind of guy? Like, have you started to think about some things that you want to do, for 2022? Some people call them resolutions. I call them setting goals for the next year. You know what I mean? I haven't really started to do that yet, but I'm going to. Are you that kind of guy?
Yeah, we do it every year. My wife and I think about it like this week leading up when I'm doing dishes or something, kind of like, oh, what am I going to do? But we really don't. What we do is we look back at our year's previous ones. We need to start looking back at it probably quarterly because we forget some of them every year. When we look back, we're like, oh, I forgot I was going to do that or whatever. And so my hit rate's low on resolutions. I might be at like 15-20% all-time hit rate. But what I've done over the years now is we keep little lists, and I've tried to really limit it to like 5 to 10 things and try to make it attainable ones. And if I do hit it a year or 2 in a row, then up it from there. But mine tend to be similar to everybody else's. I got a weight loss one or a health one in there every single year, trying to read more books, some of that stuff. Work something about the podcast, get better at something and all that. And I think it's, some of my friends give me a hard time about that stuff, and resolutions are stupid, but I think goal setting matters whether or not you hit them or not. I think it's good to want to improve yourself or your situation. And so I won't ever knock anyone for, even if it's short-lived or whatever, looking inward and trying to find ways to improve yourself. I think that's a pretty awesome tradition. So we try to maintain it, but I don't think I hit very many this year. I can't remember all of them, but there's a few that I was like, oh man, I should have probably been working on that. I ain't gonna hit it.
I asked you, there's a specific reason why I asked you this question, and it's so last night it's 1 or 2 in the morning. Aaron and I tape this show Thursdays at 9:30. So by the way, if something significant and crazy happens on Thursday during the day, Aaron and I already put this episode in the bank. But I asked you this because I had done literally no show prep for this at all. I had a lot of stuff going on yesterday. It's 1 in the morning. I said, all right, I got to start down and at least figure out a couple bullet points for Aaron and I to talk about. And then I get a message from fucking Joe at Buffalo Wins on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I call him my frenemy. Okay.
Yeah.
And I realized, and we proceeded for the next hour and a half to go at it and start fighting, which was a continuation of us fighting. I'm talking about Facebook, like messaging.
Yeah. Messaging back and forth.
It was a continuation of like pretty much the last 3 days. And I'm like, this is what I realized. I need to stop. Like, I'm going to throw one resolution out there for me right now. You can't convince people of something that they believe in. You're not going to change people's minds. So don't waste so much negative energy and focus fighting with somebody when you know that you're not going to be able to change their minds. You know what I'm saying? I do that all the time. And Joe's the same. And look, I'm not saying Joe's wrong about this and I'm right about this. That's not what I'm saying. And him and I have a good relationship on the podcast when we're looking at each other, when we see each other in person. We're terrible friends on social media. I hate what he says. He hates what I say. And it leads to, at least private for the most part, fights all the time. And I'm like, I ain't convincing him of like things I don't want to talk about on the air and vice versa. And it's like, I go back and I look at the messages. I'm like, we fight about the same fucking things over and over and over and over again. And nothing is going to change. I waste so much negative energy fighting with people on topics when you're not going to change the other person's mind. I
used to do it all the time, dude. My Facebook, like circa 2007, 8, 9, was terrible, super political, super passionate. And I thought my goal out there was like, I don't care if I piss off 50 people as long as I change one person's mind, right? Like that was my thing. Like if I can convince one person, and every once in a while you did, but it's toxic. It's not good. And most of the time you're not. You're right. You're not going to change people's minds. You're not going to change their opinions. And my thing now is, unless those are dangerous opinions, like unless your opinions lead to putting people at risk or are like dangerous towards people or make people feel whatever it is towards themselves, I can tolerate disagreements and just like, I really don't want to hear about it. Like, let's just not talk about it. We're going to end up fighting. That's not fun. I like you. Like, let's just leave it at that. It's when people's ideas lead to things that are dangerous and stuff. And that's where I draw the line. It's like, okay, now we can't discuss that. We can't have these conversations, or I cannot be your friend.
I hate having points hammered in my face, and I do it to him too, or in other people too. It's not just me and Joe. It's plenty of people. I just waste time. You tell me something and you're shoving it down my throat that I'm not going to change. But
Joe's like game day Nate Geary. When things are happening real time in the world, he's like political Nate Geary game day. Like like he is so intense and so passionate and so overreactionary in those moments. Like I also am a friend of me with Joe, and I like him. I think he's actually a real smart guy, but he gets just so mad and angry in the moment and just will blast out whatever is coming his way. And Nate does that during game day, and he says all the time, like, you can't take me seriously in those moments.
Joe really wants to do a podcast with you on it too.
He's not going to get the rise out of me he thinks he is. Everyone thinks they're going to get to me.
I'm back with Aaron Quinn. As we were going to break, he says he's not going to get the rise out of me that he thinks. I agree, because you know what? You are, and this is another thing too, and I think people feed into this. You are, and I've known you for a while now, and I've obviously talked to you all the time. You are very level-headed. You're not hot-headed. At least if you are, you're not when we do this podcast. You're not on social media. You are level with the Buffalo Bills. Like, I don't think you get too high when things are going good, and I also don't think you get too low. The sky's not falling when Dane Jackson has a couple shitty games or the Bills lose on the road to the Jets. Whereas me, I'm a little bit more of I'm a lot more of a knee-jerk reactor, an emotional guy. You know, so being an emotionally charged guy, I'm hot-headed. And Joe's hot-headed. A lot of people, not just, again, forget us two. People in general, there's a lot of hot-headed people on social media, and it just leads to a lot of ugliness. But anyway.
It's easy to fire off thoughts. Right. Like
Yes.
that's the problem with Twitter is it's so easy and you can just put a thought out there and get it out. And so if you are a person that is reactionary, man, if you go through my game day thread, you'll see some stuff. I equally get called a homer and a Debbie Downer. So I think I got some
I don't
reactionary
see
stuff
it.
in
I
there.
don't see
Yeah.
the Debbie Downer part. If somebody called you a homer, I could see it. Now, I don't believe it because I know
Sure.
you well enough
Sure.
and I
Sure.
know you're objective, but I don't see the Debbie Downer.
I don't think so, but I don't know. You can't please anyone on the internet, man. Everybody's got an opinion.
All right. Anyway, a very big game coming up Monday night for the Buffalo Bills. I'll tell you what, this is only the second time this entire season for the Bills where I feel like Buffalo's going to have to do more than just simply go out and not blow the game, not beat themselves. I think for the Bills to win on Monday night, they're going to have to play a good game. You're not going to get away
Sure.
with just simply not beating yourself. The only other game this whole entire season I felt that same way was Kansas City, and the
Yeah.
Bills went out and they played well. You know, every other game it's just like, hey, don't beat yourself, boys.
You might be hearing my kids in the background. They were quiet for like the first half hour of the
Holiday
show,
weekend.
but
It's
all
a
right.
podcast. I like it, man.
All
That's
right.
cool. What let me ask you this. So you
Yeah.
guys did, I don't want to get too, deep in the weeds when it comes to a Bills Bengals preview, but I
Sure.
will ask you because you did your show with Greg last. I know you had a couple guests on as well. What were some of your main talking points going into this game?
That the Bengals are one of the best teams the Bills are facing this year, right? This is probably the biggest matchup in the NFL for the season. I think everybody knows that stuff, right? Like we know who Burrow is, we know who Jamar Chase is, we know T
Mm-hmm.
Higgins, we know Mixon. So that was what we were trying to avoid on our show. Is like we know what they can do. We know that Dane Jackson's probably going to struggle. They're going to get explosive plays. You're not going to stop this offense. The Bills aren't going to probably hold them under 20. Like all those things, I think we just have to acknowledge. The other thing, though, I think that maybe gets a little bit overblown by the media right now because we get hyped up in the current vibe and in the current recency biases. I think people are taking the Bengals' ability to beat the Kansas City Chiefs regularly and saying that now that the Bengals are in that tier of elite teams in the NFL. And maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'll get dunked on all weekend long on Monday night, but I still think that it's the Bills, the Chiefs, the Eagles, and the Bengals are on that top next tier. I really don't believe that they are in the Super Bowl contender category quite yet. Can they get hot and be that team like they were last year that rides a wave to the Super Bowl? For sure. But outside of that Kansas City Chiefs win, which again, impressive that they continue to beat the Chiefs 3 times in a row, they've got the recipe. So good on them. I'm not trying to take anything away from them. It is a very good football team. But outside of that, the wins that they've stacked up haven't been impressive. They haven't all been blowouts. They haven't played, again, similar to the Bills. They haven't put together perfect football. They're trending in the right direction at the right time, but they're not some team that is without flaw. And so I think we look at them because they do have superstar talent that can keep up with the Bills, and they have the potential to go off explosively on offense. And we see some faults with this defense. I think a lot of the questions about the defense is nitpicking. Really, I think the Bills, by all measures, have an elite defense. And when we start talking about missed tackle percentages and things like that, I think we're nitpicking a little bit because those problems aren't really over the stretch of the sample size that we have for the season, haven't really been that big of an issue when you're holding opponents to 17 points a game and you have the best red zone defense in the NFL and you have the best rushing defense in the NFL and all these statistics favor it being an elite defense here. I think ultimately the Bills are a step above. I think they're a more balanced team. I think they have more experience in close games. I think that they have more versatility. Like I love Joe Burrow. I love what he can do. I think he is an elite QB in the NFL, but I think Josh Allen is like one of three, one of two type of guys. And so I think still the Bills have the advantage, especially if the weather's not going to be a problem. They're talking like 50 degrees, maybe down to the 40s in the evening,
Yeah,
maybe some light drizzle. That's going to be the best weather game the Bills have played in a month and a half, Pat. Like,
I know.
people are frustrated. Diggs isn't getting the ball. The offense isn't clicking at all times. It's like, man, some of the conditions they've played in. I think people are underestimating how bad things were in Chicago for that game with how good the run game looked and stuff like that. And people were concerned Josh Allen have a crappy game. Those were terrible conditions. It didn't show up on the broadcast because it's wind and cold. Like those don't display themselves in the same way as rain. So, but they have not played a nice weather game. And we're talking about 50 with drizzle at night in Cincinnati as maybe the best game they've played in 5-6 games.
Yeah. There's a few things about the Bengals I want to bring up. You just and I do the same thing. I think you just did it. So you have your words about them, and I agree with everything for the most part that you said, except I do think that they're right there on that level. But it's almost like you, and most people talk about the Bengals like they're still on the come up. I mean, they went to the Super Bowl last year. They won the AFC, which again, I know there's a lot of teams that get to a Super Bowl one year, but they're not really good. Just everything seems to fall in place, and then they fall right back the next year.
Mm-hmm.
You're not seeing that with Cincinnati.
No.
They're in a.
I think some of that is the Ravens are struggling.
Sure.
Cleveland
Injuries
and
again.
Cleveland and the Steelers are not good football teams this year.
No.
Like, so that helps inflate that a little bit. Again, I think they're good. I think they're a playoff team. I think they're in the caliber of the Miami Dolphins, the Minnesota Vikings, who I think their record's a little inflated with some luck in those one-score games. That's the tier right now that I put them on. They have the chance this weekend, either by beating the Bills, in whatever scenario that could be, or even a real close nail biter, exactly what Vegas is predicting this game to be, where they just go toe to toe with the Bills. Then I think that I would put them into that category with the Bills, with the Chiefs, with the Eagles, as just those top teams in the league that are contending for a Super Bowl. I know they were at the Super Bowl last year. I thought a little bit that was fraudulent. I think both the Rams and Bengals getting to the Super Bowl last year was a really wacky year of those.
Sure.
Every divisional game ended in a one-score game. So you're going to have some of those that probably don't go the way that they ought to. And so
but the Rams plummeted this year, and the Bengals are still
and you
really
look at some
good.
of the coaching decisions in some of the games and why teams advance. Like, I don't know that the teams that deserved to, or the teams that were the best teams in the playoffs, got to the Super Bowl last year, which is okay. That's the design of the tournament. But I thought they were a little fraudulent last year. And I think they're riding that hype again into the playoffs. And we did a big playoff extravaganza, and a lot of guys were worried about the Bengals. And I was like, I don't know. I just don't see it, with consistency. And then I kind of looked like an idiot when they got to the Super Bowl, but I still stand by the take that I don't think they were that team a year ago. I think this is a better Bengals team than they were a year ago. I think the offense is better. I think that they have more splash on defense, but I don't know, man. It's interesting because this is the one matchup, last year when the Bills lost to the Chiefs in the 13 seconds, we were, as the Mafia, super confident that if the Bills got past that they were just going to blow through the Bengals, right? Yeah. And again, these aren't the same teams, but we haven't gotten to see this matchup of what some consider to be a top contender in the AFC, but it's not universal. Like, not everybody was in on the Bengals to be a top contender. So this matchup to me is the best matchup for the NFL this year. They've had some stinker primetime games come up this year. So they're finally getting really two top-notch teams, I think, both trending in the right direction heading into the postseason. You still got a week before the season wraps up. So the game matters to these teams. You're jockeying for that one seed. Like, everybody's got something to prove in this game on the national stage. I don't think we've seen a better game in terms of a heavyweight fight shaping up to a primetime game than we're going to get in this one. I just hope it lives up to the hype that it's going to get as we ramp into this week.
I would be stunned if it doesn't. I saw a stat. I often think stats are overrated. I really do. But I know you're a big DVOA guy.
I do like it. Yep.
And I saw a graphic with that stat. The Bills are second in the NFL at 29.9%. San Francisco's first at 36. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the DVOA means, but I know this. I looked at the leaders. San Francisco's 1, Buffalo's 2, Cincy's 4. Top 6 were San Francisco, Buffalo, Philly, Cincinnati, Kansas City, and Dallas. Guess what? Those are the 6 best teams in the NFL. So it's obvious that stat must be correlated to good teams. And I noticed that both Buffalo and Cincy were in the top 4 there. I think the Bengals are going to be hyped, man. I think to some extent, even what you just said, I think they feel a little bit of disrespect. I think that they feel like they are on that same level as Buffalo and Kansas City and Philly. Everyone still talks Bills and Chiefs in the AFC, and I get it. I know why. Joey Burrow, too. Now, I know a lot of people, and maybe players do, maybe they don't. I know fans certainly do. If Joe Burrow goes out on Monday night and he plays really well and they beat the Bills, he very well can win MVP. I mean, you're talking about a guy who beat Mahomes and Joey Burrow in the same year. And if he plays doing it, I think they got a real chance. And when he's 3-0 versus Pat Mahomes, which, again, you said it, it's kind of just weird. They just have that formula to play the Chiefs well. I don't know. I just think this is going to be a really hyped team. Now, don't get me wrong. I still think the Bills are a better team.
Votes. I think he gets some votes. I think it's going to be Mahomes is going to win MVP no matter
what.
Right? Like,
Unless he well, who's he going to really play bad against these last two games? That's what I'm saying.
And even if he does, like in their losses, he's still balled out. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's having such a good season. I can't see him not getting it. I think whoever wins this game Monday will earn themselves more votes than they would have otherwise gotten in the MVP race. And I think if Allen wins, it'll be shockingly close of a race this year between Mahomes and Allen, where it's not like Allen gets the whatever he got last year, 2-3 votes. Like it'll be a big lion's share if Allen wins. Where Joe Burrow, I think if he wins this game, it's not as big of a share, but it will increase his bump in those votes.
Sure. I think that, and who cares in the
Yeah,
grand
I
scheme
don't
of
care.
things, but
Win the Super
I
Bowl
think,
MVP.
the ship sailed on Josh winning MVP last week. Maybe not fair. Like you said, the conditions were terrible, but 2 interceptions that were not good. That shows
Sure.
up on the stat sheet. Look, this game's pretty simple for the Bills. I'll break it down real quick. The Bills win. They're the number 1 seed. As long as they don't choke at home against the Patriots in week 18, the Bills are the 1 seed. If the Bills lose, they're certainly almost done being the number 1 seed. It would take
Then
Kansas
you're
City
just
losing.
resting people, right? Like
It could happen. Right. Right.
they can't be any worse than the 3rd seed.
They can't be any worse than the 3rd seed. So if the Bills, let's just say the Bills lose, we're going to go ahead and give Kansas City the 1.
You're
Then
getting
you're
a bye
going
either way, right?
to who?
The Bill, either way, you're getting somewhat of a bye. Whether or not if you win this game, you're going to probably get the bye
Sure.
for the bye week.
Yeah.
And if you lose this game, you're at least like Josh Diggs, like your important guys. You're going to still have to play some people because the 53-man roster is only so big. You're going to have some of those bit major guys play some snaps, but you're going to be able to rest a lot of your team.
Oh, so you're saying the Bills will rest a lot of guys if they lose?
I hope.
Tonight
I don't think you
week
go into a game against the Patriots that doesn't matter, and the worst you can get is 3rd place, and the bye's already off the table, right? Like if you lose to the Bengals, that's off the table. You're done chasing that. And so I would use the opportunity to not put more mileage on Josh, not put more mileage on anyone that's dinged up and needs a break. I would get that in immediately.
That's sensible. I will say this though too. If let's just say the Bills lose, the way they could still be the number 1 seed will be gone, but they would be number 2 if the Bengals lost in week 18. And they do, it's at home, but they are playing the Ravens, and maybe Lamar's back for that game. That's not a gimme. That's not like the Chiefs playing the Broncos, you know what I mean, in week 18. So being 2 versus 3 is significant, obviously, because you're guaranteed 2 home games in Orchard Park instead of 1. Like if the Bills lose on Monday night, and let's just say the Bengals handle business in week 18, now you're talking about the divisional round. Assuming you win the wild card round, you're going to Cincinnati again for the divisional round instead of them coming to you if you're the 2.
Sure.
So, but is that going to make you risk starters and depending on another team to beat the Bengals? Probably not. I never really thought of that till you just said that.
I mean, maybe the plan is where it's like Allen for a couple series. You go out and try to get that lead and walk those guys off the off the field. I don't know. I also think I hate to sound real homery cocky, but I think the Bills could probably work the Patriots even with like Case Keenum and have a decent running game. I think you'd be fine to get through a game like that. And the Patriots seem to be in disarray right now to me.
Yeah. Well,
even keeping that game, they were close with the Bengals. That was fluky, man. That was a fluky ass game of them keeping that game close. They had no business in that.
Oh, I got so mad too when they lost. Look, it's easy to be hindsight. There's every team around the NFL could say, "Oh my God, there's one game we should have won. How did we lose this game?" I can't stop thinking about that Vikings game. I'm going to be honest with you.
Yeah, except for the Vikings. The Vikings are the only team that seems to be freaking winning every one of those.
Right. That 3-score lead they blew in the second half. If Josh Allen gets that snap and gets that knee down, and the Bills could lose to the Bengals and still win the being the number 1 seed, even if they lost on Monday night. So, that haunts me a little bit. And that's why during these games where people are like, "Oh, it's a long season, don't mean that much." It kind of does, because it comes back. It always comes back. It always comes back in the end.
I don't know how much the bye matters, to be honest. I don't know that it's outside home field advantage somewhat matters. Again, there's data that says that doesn't mean what it used to mean. Home field advantage. That some of that's not as important.
Joe swears it's not even an advantage for the Bills to play in Orchard Park because of the weather. He says he would rather play. He'd rather go to Cincinnati in 40. He'd rather go to Cincinnati if it's 42 degrees out and calm than be at home in Orchard Park if it's 15 degrees out with 15, 20, 25 mile an hour wind.
There's a variance that is included with.
I don't agree with that.
But I think my thing is in weather, the guy that touches the ball the most, we always have the advantage.
I agree.
right? So like if you have a quarterback and you need to throw in a certain situation, I'm taking Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes over every single other human being in the world to throw in weather conditions. And so I think that that's a substantial advantage, even in bad weather. So I don't know that I totally agree with that take, but in terms of, there's a lot of people out there that believe, and I'm kind of in this camp, that as long as you are handle business when you have to, and you're a 10 to 12 win team in the NFL, it's like the NCAA bracket, March Madness. It's getting into the tournament, right? Once you're into the tournament, and if you're playing hot going in, we've seen it so many years in March Madness. We've seen it so many years in the NFL where the March Madness reference would be like that Huskies team that went on the Big East tournament run. That wasn't a great team in the regular season. They got hot at the right time and just took that momentum into the tournament and go on a run. The Bengals last year, the Rams started playing right at the right time when the Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers won a Super Bowl. That wasn't a great season for them. They've had seasons, the last 4 seasons or something, they were the 1 seed in the NFC and they didn't advance as far as they advanced when they were a wild card. The Giants did it. And again, these aren't the norm. Normally you don't get a wild card to come in and advance, but it's also not as, I think the 13 seconds really left a lot of scar tissue for Bills fans, where we really just think, oh, if we were just at home, that game goes different. All we need is home field and everything changes and it fixes everything. The Bills still need to, at the end of the day, execute in those situations and be better in those situations, whether it's in Buffalo, whether it's in KC. And we have seen this year them improve in a lot of those areas. We've seen some really good closing out game type situations, even as going back to a week ago. And so I think they are improving in that area. I'm willing to take, if this team is doing what I think they're doing, which is, again, the offense back to more balance, trending in the right way. The defense is really playing lockdown, bend but don't break. I think that, people are going to be frustrated in a game like this, Pat, where, Joe Burrow and T. Higgins and Jamar Chase are going to win most of their matchups, just like they do against every other team. Quarterbacks throw for 60% league wide for a reason. They win the majority of matchups. Offense is winning. There'll be some frustrations, but this is probably the best defense that Bengals offense has also faced. And so
Sure.
I think you get this team heading in the right direction, getting into the postseason. That's all I care about. For me personally, I want the 1 seed. That would be cooler. That'd be easier. I want the games in Buffalo, but just be playing the best football you can at the right time, get into the tournament and go on a run. That's really what it's all about.
It's a top heavy year in the AFC. While you were talking, I was looking up on the computer because I couldn't remember. So it's not even just possible. It's realistic that the Bills could lose on Monday, win week 18, whether they play their backups or not, finish 13 or 4. What is it? 13 and 4. What would be the record if they lost? 14 and 4. 14 and 4. Right? So no, 13 and 4, 17 games.
13 and 4,
I'll get it right. So they could finish 13 and 4 this year and be the 3rd seed. I looked last year. The Tennessee Titans were the 1 seed at 12 and 5.
Yeah.
The Bills can be 13 and 4 this year and still end up being the 3. One other question too. Now we're looking ahead a little bit, so I'm projecting, but right now, as things stand today, now I know there's no team that's necessarily going to scare you, but you look at the playoffs and how things are starting to shape up, and whether the Bills are the 1 to 2 to 3, whatever. Name me a team that you would play in the first round that would probably have you. Again, I don't want to say scared, but certainly concerned a little bit if you're a Bills fan. Like, what team do you want to play the least in the first round right now?
So who would be the current, even possible matchups? I'm trying to think.
Probably the Chargers, the Dolphins, the Ravens. Probably one. I feel like those are going to be the 3 wild card teams. Although the Chargers are no longer a lock, man, because Tua's out.
Yeah, I'm looking it up now. So right now the Chargers are the 6th seed. Yeah. Right. And so the Bills right now are the 1 seed. So I don't know, Jags are probably the team in it right now that I want the most, and they're the 4th seed. That's the matchup that you want to get.
I want Miami the most.
I don't know, man. It depends where Tua's at, right? I
don't care.
I don't think I think they're a mid team. I don't think they're on the elite side. My concern with Miami still is that if things are functioning, that's the problem with Tua, is if everything's going right, that's the system that you can win with. And that's hard to replicate over and over again. But when you get it right for one game, it can be magic. It can be explosive. I watched too many Miami games where they just, even in games they don't belong in, just get a 60-yarder here, a 70-yarder there. It's like, damn, they're back in a game. What the? You're like, And that was the problem with the Bills with that speed in Kansas City. And I don't think Tua can do it in the big moment. I think that's probably their problem, similar to like a Kirk Cousins. Probably not going to get it done in the big moment, but I don't want to face the potential of the most explosive potential offense in the NFL having a day against us and ruining our game plan. Where I don't think part of the problem too is I'm not talking about, the teams that I think that you would face later. I'm thinking about these bottom teams in this,
Right,
like
of
who's an
course.
annoying, sneaky team. If Kansas or if Baltimore, if Lamar gets healthy and Baltimore gets healthy and starts clicking, like they've had a really weird 2 seasons in Baltimore. But that's always a team that I feel like if they do get right at the right time, they have all the makings to be a really good team. But it's Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier. People knock them a lot, but one thing they would have done a very good job at, we saw it against the Bears with Fields, is containing those like mobile athletic QBs that are run first type QBs. And they did a really good job with Lamar so far in their recent history. And so I would feel good about that matchup. It's the speed of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle that just absolutely terrifies me.
It's easy for me. And you didn't even mention this team. And I know why. And I know when I bring them up, a lot of people are going to dismiss them and I get why. It's the Chargers. I just think they're like Miami in terms of being dangerous. Like you just said, put things together. You could have like that magical day. And it's like, dude, they got a good quarterback. They got multiple good receivers. They got 2 good running backs, including a great one. And they got guys who could get after a quarterback in wreck a day.
Yeah. And I do love
Khalil
Derwin
Mack.
James too.
Yeah. So, I mean,
my thing, I think
they're getting pretty hot too, by the way.
I think Herbert gets a little bit overhyped. I think that Twitter loves him. I think that the media loves him. I think he looks like, if I was to cast a QB, I would have casted Justin Herbert. Like he looks the part. He's got the long hair. He's got the physique. Like he's tall. He's got the chiseled build, and he does make nice when everything's clean. And sometimes on the run, like he can make some crazy good throws. He's got a good arm, but I just feel like he falls short. Like it's hollow. It's a little bit toothless. Like when you need him to make plays, it just seems like it breaks down. He's not quite there. And I think, to your point of Joe Burrow feeling disrespected, I think early this year, a lot of people just wanted to hype up the Chargers and hype up Herbert as this, like he's in there with Mahomes and Allen, and people were kind of leaving Burrow out of it. I would take Joe Burrow right now 9, 8, 10 out of 10 times over Herbert if I was starting a franchise. Like Burrow should be getting more credit than Herbert. So that's the other thing, is like the Chargers. I just haven't seen, this is his first entry into the playoffs. Like I will take that. I think Sean McDermott, Leslie Frazier against a Justin Herbert in his first playoff game, I'm taking that all day, every day.
They were supposed to be right there with the Chiefs before the season, in this vaunted AFC West, which never materialized. I tend to agree they are playing good now though, but I will say it's the offensive line. I think the Bills front 7 could dominate the Chargers offensive line and create a lot of problems for Herbert. There's no team that I'm afraid of. I'm just saying, of those teams,
sure,
I just don't think Baltimore, they can make it an ugly game, play really good defense. But
Khalil Mack against
right,
Spencer
Brown,
right
4 sacks against Spencer Brown. I can see it happening. You know what I mean? So that's the one that I definitely I don't want to see. But anyway, it's going to be a good game. Pretty big stakes. I never thought about that take that, or what you said, that it might be the Bills might rest their starters if they lose. I never really thought of that. It might make sense. I don't know.
I'm wrong all the time, so don't bank on it.
Well, I hope you're wrong about it. I hope we don't get to find out. Let's just put it that way, man. Anyway, all right, man. Thank you for doing the podcast. I know you got a lot going on in the Aaron Quinn household this week.
It's busy, yeah.
It is, but I always appreciate you, man. Again, last episode of the year.
Happy New Year, man.
I would say everyone stay safe. Everyone, of course, stay safe, but it looks nice out, dude. It's like if you and I were going to go out for lunch
Make sure the basements don't flood. Yeah. That's about it.
All right, man. Guys, take care. Talk to you soon. I guess I could say it now. Happy New Year. So talk to you guys early next week.